First at 4 from downtown Montgomery. A protest happening right now around the state capitol. Some demonstrators even going inside the State House and refusing to leave. Many of them undocumented workers from Alabama and elsewhere protesting our state's new immigration law. Others are lining the streets outside the State House. Their chant, we're told, undocumented, unafraid. Let's go straight to our own Tametria Conner, who's covering this protest live. And Tametria, this kind of grew out of nothing this afternoon.
And Mark, the police just made an important announcement. They said in 20 minutes, all of these protesters will need to leave or they will be arrested. Now, I'm at the corner of South Union and Washington, and if you can see behind me, there are about 11 people that are seated on the street. Now, they're comparing this to the Greensboro sit-ins, and they're saying they are not moving until they get a response from Senator Beeson. Now, again, there are about a dozen or so of these people on the ground, and also the police presence is very strong here. I actually saw the police chief as well as Chris Murphy, who's our public safety director. We have a bike patrol unit here as well as police officers on the street, and they just announced 20 minutes. If not, people will be arrested. So this is becoming a very serious protest here. It was peaceful, but it's a lot of energy here, and these people are serious.
Tametria, these are undocumented workers, or illegal aliens, if you want to call them that, and they have told us that they are ready to be arrested. They realize that by conducting this protest, they are letting officials know of their undocumented status. Have you talked to any of them, and why are they going to this extreme?
Absolutely. In fact, you think this may be radical outside. I spoke with a young man who's from the UCLA in California. He's a graduate student. He's actually inside of the State House right now. He's locked arm in arm with another student. And they said that it's the radical demonstrations like this that's going to create change. They are chanting no courage, no change. So they feel that these radical measures are necessary to get the attentions of our lawmakers, Mark.
Very courageous indeed of those illegals protesting at the state capitol. Tametria, we will check in with you again in just a few minutes. By the way, this protest comes just one day after the first in-depth national reporting on Alabama's immigration law. Governor Bentley gave his first national TV interview on this topic last night to Rock Center with Brian Williams. We've placed a link to that report on the homepage of WSFA.com. You'll also find an online poll on the topic. Now, we want to take you back to the Capitol complex in downtown Montgomery, where undocumented workers are protesting Alabama's immigration law.
Police have warned they have about 10 more minutes before they start making arrests. We'll go back there live when WSFA 12 News First at 4 continues.
Police have just cleared all the protesters. There were about 11 protesters seated right here. As you can see, they are no longer here. They have been arrested. 11 people were taken into custody. They are now being loaded on a school bus. Right now, you're looking at all the police officers. Police Chief Kevin Murphy is here. The public safety director is here. We have the bike patrol and dozens of officers on foot. Now, these protesters were seated for about an hour right here in front of the State House on the corner of South Union and Washington Avenue. It was a peaceful demonstration. The police were very lenient. They warned the protesters several times that it was illegal to block the street. The protesters didn't listen to them, and they sat. In fact, I spoke with one of them who said that they're comparing this to the Greensboro sit-ins in the 1960s. So they refused to move, and the police had no other, nothing else to do but to arrest them. And again, 11 protesters have been arrested, and they were just taken into custody. Back to you.
Tametria, we can see and hear some other people in the background there chanting. Are they supporting the protesters or police?
They are supporting the protesters, and about 100 people, and these are people from not only Alabama but across the country, and they are a part of an organized movement called the National Immigrant Youth Alliance and the Alabama Youth Collective. And these people are supporting again, the protesters, and they are chanting, "No courage, no change." They feel that this radical demonstration, this radical thing is needed. In fact, we still have 2 young men that are inside of the State House right now in the middle of the floor, and they're locked arm in arm because they feel that they need to get the lawmakers' attention, and this is the only way that they can do that.
The courage, of course, that they're talking about, Tametria, is the fact that they are putting themselves at risk, protesting openly, even though they themselves are undocumented workers. So they risk deportation here. I imagine right now, though, they're being taken to the Montgomery City Jail for processing.
And that's right, Mark. That fear that you're talking about, a lot of these protesters are saying that this law is creating fear, and they are saying, don't be fearful, be courageous, take that chance. And these people were prepared to go to jail. And again, that's exactly what happened. 11 people out of about 100 were arrested. And again, they said they were not afraid. Mark?
All right, Tametria Conner joining us live from downtown Montgomery, where 20 to 30 protesters, undocumented workers, illegals, if you want to call them that, are protesting Alabama's immigration law, which, Sally, of course, allows police to check your immigration status when they pull you over, and also requires businesses to check the immigration status of its workers.
And we saw the governor talking about this on NBC last night, his first nationally televised interview, and he said himself that he had some reservations about parts of the law, specifically the part dealing with school children. And of course, recently he said he felt it should be simplified.
Right. The part where school children would have to be checked was blocked by a court, but these legal challenges will continue over the coming weeks and months. And of course, WSFA 12 News will keep you posted on it all.
We'll be right back.
Let's go back to our breaking news happening in downtown Montgomery, where a couple dozen, if you will, undocumented workers were arrested just a short time ago by Montgomery police for protesting Alabama's immigration law. Sally, they were lined up on the streets, sitting in the streets, some of them even sitting inside Alabama's State House.
That's right. Let's go back live to WSFA 12 News reporter Tametria Conner. And Tametria, we understand you have a protester with you.
That's right, Sally. She represents the National Immigration Youth Alliance, Fernanda Martinez, and you're emotional right now. In fact, I saw you crying with the protesters that were seated right here in the street. Why are you upset?
Because we shouldn't have to go through this. We shouldn't have to live in fear just because we don't have a social security number. We shouldn't have to be afraid to step out of our homes. Kids shouldn't be afraid to go to school. A 12-year-old shouldn't be afraid to go to school because of his immigration status, because he's afraid of that. This is it's barbaric. It's the most, I mean, and it's happening right here in Alabama. It's happening all over the South. It's happening all over the country, and we're undocumented and we're unafraid. And an attack on the undocumented community in Alabama is an attack on all the undocumented community throughout the country. So that is why the National Immigrant Youth Alliance is here today, and we're here in solidarity with the people of the undocumented community in Alabama, and we're not going to stop until our communities are living without fear.
Why did you think such a radical move was needed? The police warned you all that it was illegal to block a street, but they continued to stay. Why do you think that was necessary?
Do you remember the Greensboro sit-ins? Do you remember when black students sat down at lunch counters because they weren't allowed to sit with white folks? And that was also illegal, right? They did it because they were unwilling to comply with unjust laws. And that's the same thing that we're doing today. We're not going to comply with laws that keep our families in the shadows, that keep our families living in fear. We're coming out, we're unafraid, and every time we do it, we risk being deported. But what we've noticed is that if we remain in the shadows, it is when ICE, when Immigration Customs Enforcement, takes advantage of that, when we're afraid, when we're vulnerable. And that is why we're no longer afraid, and we're coming out and we're saying, hey, listen, like, come and get me. I'm undocumented, you know? If it was my mom and dad driving without a license, my mother and my father would be put into deportation proceedings like this, you know? So I think that that it's time that we drop the fear, and that people realize that we're human beings, and that we're like their kids, and that we're like their you know? So.
Well, Ms. Martinez, thank you so much for your time. And Chief Murphy is now about to step up again. Thank you. We're going to speak with the chief right now. Chief, you have a strong presence out here with the police force. You all were very lenient with the protesters. I heard police officers warn them several times about the activity, that it was illegal to block the street, even though it was a peaceful protest. Kind of talk about that and talk about what ended up happening.
Well, we had a very unified presence out here, not just the police department, but the Department of Public Safety for the state Capitol Police, and the Department of Homeland Security for Alabama were also present at this scene. We did explain to the group who was blocking the street, which is against the law. It's called disorderly conduct. You cannot block a main thoroughfare or any right-of-way. They were given warnings in English and in Spanish and told to disperse and leave the right-of-way or they would be arrested. They were given 10 minutes to comply. When they failed to comply, we once again gave them another warning and told them at that point in time they'd be arrested immediately if they did not vacate. They refused to do so. They were arrested for disorderly conduct, not for the immigration law.
And Chief, I counted 11 people. Is that number accurate?
I didn't count them. I would take your word for it.
And so from here, they're being detained at the county jail, and then do you have to then report to the Immigration and Custom and Enforcement about them being undocumented?
It's a city street. They're actually going to the city jail under the charge of disorderly conduct. As with any arrest, a determination is made on identity. And if any of these individuals are found to be in the state, in the country illegal, we will comply with the state law regarding immigration.
Well, thank you so much, Chief. We appreciate your time. And you heard from a protester, you heard from the police chief. This was a peaceful protest, but it did result in about 11 people being arrested. Mark, Sally?
All right, Tametria Conner reporting live in downtown Montgomery. We'll check back in with you later.
It really is just a catch-22 for a lot of these illegal immigrants. They're trying to flee the drug cartels in Mexico. They're trying to make their lives better. And then when they get here, because they did it illegally, they're also facing prosecution here in the United States. It is an issue that obviously has two sides to it.
And we just heard some of those protesters could be deported if they are found to be in this country illegally.
All right. We'll keep covering the issue, of course, for you. WSFA 12 News First at 4. We'll be right back.
We've had a protest demonstration that just ended downtown.
And several protesters were arrested. Let's go back live to WSFA 12 News reporter Tametria Conner. Now, Tametria, not all the protesters were arrested, right?
That's right, and in fact, I'm standing here now with Muhammad Abdullahi, who's with the Alabama Youth Collective. There were about 100 protesters, Muhammad, and about 11 were arrested. Now, you were not, and in fact, we still have some protesters out here on the sidewalk. Kind of talk about the atmosphere. I mean, it was people crying. We heard a lot of chanting, very emotional.
I mean, you know, this is reminiscent of why laws like HB 56, legislation harming our communities, were able to pass, because for a long time our community's been afraid of speaking out. I'm undocumented, a lot of folks here were undocumented, and this was really the first time that they've stood up and said they're undocumented, they're unafraid, and they're willing to fight back. And so that's why there was a lot of tears here, because people recognize that it took almost 2 hours for these people to be arrested, when normally if our family is profiled, if they're arrested for a broken taillight, they're put in jail, they're put into deportation within a matter of hours. And so now the community recognizes that if we come together, we have power, just as traditionally through the civil rights era, we have power. And so the community is recognizing its voice. That's why emotions were so high here. We recognize that legislators like this cannot continue to hurt our communities if we have a voice, if we speak out, and if we put them essentially on notice that we're not afraid.
And Muhammad, you're from Bessemer, Alabama, right?
Yes, I've been working out of Bessemer, Alabama for over about a month now with the community there. You know, we're working with them for them to recognize the voice that they truly have, that, you know, we can change the story. These folks hopefully will not be deported because the community is going to come out, is going to fight for them, and we're going to recognize that they're an asset to this country.
And when we say undocumented, meaning no birth certificate, talk about that, what that means.
Yeah. For example, you know, one of the students that was here has been living here since he was 4 months old. He came here with his parents in search of a better life, in search of opportunities since he was 4 months old. He has no other home. He's gone to school here, he's grown up here, he speaks the language. This is his home, this is where he belongs, and it doesn't make sense for him to leave. This is our community. We're just fighting for the option, the opportunity to stay in our community. Unfortunately, legislators like this just want to create havoc in our lives and push us out, and you know, we have to fight back at some point, and unfortunately they've gone too far. And so the community is ready to fight back. We're ready to show that we have a voice, that we're We're no longer afraid. You can't pass legislation like this with us in the shadows. We are going to fight back. People just have to open up a history book just to see where we're going. The time to fight back is now. If you're undocumented, it's your responsibility to come out. It's your responsibility to recognize you're safer as part of this community. It's your responsibility to recognize you have to fight back. Nothing is going to change if we remain in the shadows. You have to come out. You have to fight back.
Thank you so much, Muhammad. And also coming up, Sally and Bob, I've just learned that the youngest protester that was arrested is 17 years old. She's a high school student. I will be speaking with her mother. You'll hear that live interview coming up. And also behind me, you can see that the traffic is coming behind me. Remember, this road was blocked for several hours, but now the protesters are gone from the street. They have been arrested, and the traffic is running, flowing smoothly again. Bob and Sally.
Tametria, the protesters who weren't arrested, who are still downtown, what are they doing now? Are they still chanting? What is their focus now?
They're not chanting. I think they're just coming up with a game plan to see what they're going to do next. And also, if we could just get a quick shot so you can see what these protesters, some are sitting and talking, and just, I think they're regrouping, Sally and Bob. And also, you should note that we still have 2 young college students that are inside of the State House right now. They're seated in the middle of the floor, locked arm in arm, and they said that they're not going to move until they get a response from Senator Beeson. So I'll keep you updated as to that, to see if maybe the police will have them removed as well, but I'll check on that as soon as I'm done here, and we'll have an update coming up in a few minutes.
All right, we look forward to it. Thanks, Tametria.
We continue our breaking news coverage. Chanting and holding signs, protesters take over the streets in Montgomery's Capitol complex. Good evening, everyone. I'm Valerie Lawson.
And I'm Mark Bullock. Many of those protesters, undocumented workers themselves, protesting the state's controversial new immigration law.
They say the law is mean-spirited and forces illegal immigrants, many of whom came to this country to escape persecution, to again live in fear. Montgomery police arrested about a dozen of them before it was over. WSFA 12 News reporter Tametria Conner was there. And Tametria, these protesters now face possible deportation.
Val, that's correct. The police department did their part. These people, it was a much different scene behind me. It was 11 people that were seated in the street, and I'm here on the corner of South Union and Washington Avenue. Those 11 people have been arrested and charged with disorderly conduct, and now it's up to ICE, which is the Immigration Customs Enforcement, to make their determination as far as what happens, because keep in mind, these people are undocumented. They don't have birth certificates. They are not American citizens, so it's up to them to determine what happens next. So again, a very different atmosphere from what you're seeing now. Also, we have about 15 protesters that are still lining the sidewalks. They're waiting for 2 individuals. We have 2 young men who are now inside of the State House. Again, these men have been seated in the middle of the floor for about 3 hours now. They're saying that they're not going to move until they get a response from Senator Beeson. And so we've spoken to a lot of protesters and the police chief, and this is what they had to say.
We're not going to comply with laws that keep our families in the shadows, that keep our families living in fear. We're coming out, we're unafraid, and every time we do it, we risk being deported.
Cannot block a main thoroughfare or any right-of-way. They were given warnings in English and in Spanish and told to disperse and leave the right-of-way or they would be arrested.
And Val, Bob, they're comparing what this radical demonstration that happened here to the Greensboro sit-ins from the 1960s. They feel that this radical move had to be made to get the attention of lawmakers. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see how far that impact will really go. Bob, Val?
Well, Tametria, any idea what the next step will be for these protesters?
As far as we know, they're waiting now. At 5 o'clock, the doors will be locked. Now, I'm assuming that these 2 young men will probably be kicked out of the building, but these protesters are going to wait to see what happens, because keep in mind, the 2 young men said that they're not moving. So we'll wait to see. They're going to be waiting. We're all waiting to see what's going to transpire here in the next few minutes, Val.
All right, Tametria, thank you for your update. Alabama's immigration law is considered the toughest in the nation and is the focus of numerous legal challenges from various religious and civil rights groups.
Call it a strong stand against Alabama's immigration law on display tonight in the capital city. Good evening, everyone. I'm Bob Howell.
And I'm Valerie Lawson. Demonstrators inside the Alabama State House and in front in the streets protesting the country's toughest immigration law.
About 100 people took part overall in the protest. Montgomery police officers, Capitol Police, and state troopers were called in. Covering the story live since it first broke this afternoon, WSFA-12 News reporter Tametria Conner. Tametria, after that warning, officers moved in very cautiously and arrested those protesters.
That's right, Bob. A total of 13 people were arrested, and things are much quieter now than it was about an hour ago. It started as a peaceful march around the Capitol, and it ended here at South Union and Washington Avenue, where about 11 people were here in the street seated. Then 2 additional people were inside of the State House in the middle of the floor, seated as well, saying that they would not move regardless of all the warnings that were given. They would not move because they feel that a radical move has to be done in order to get the attention of the lawmakers, and it all stems from this immigration law, and the people are upset about it. They're saying that it's fear tactics. People are afraid, and they were chanting no courage, no change. They were chanting that they were not afraid and that they are undocumented, but they would come out to the public showing no fear. And as you can see from this video here, the people were arrested, and as I mentioned, there were 2 young men inside of the State House, and these were college students. And I actually spoke with one college student. He's from UCLA in California, and he said that he would not be moved.
I'm not afraid of going to jail. It's being undocumented. It's a risk that we take every single day of our lives. And if this is what it takes to get the message that we are not afraid and we don't tolerate HB 56 or laws like it, then I'm willing to take that sacrifice.
And these protesters are comparing this demonstration to the sit-ins during the civil rights movement. And as of right now, these 13 protesters are in the city jail, and the people were trying to figure out what they're going to do as far as collecting bond money. They're uncertain as to what's going to happen when the immigration and custom enforcement gets involved. So it's a lot of uncertainty, but these people feel that their efforts will not go unheard, and what they did here today will have a great impact on the future and possibly this immigration law. Bob?
And a quick question, any locals involved in this, or are all these people from out of state?
As far as I know, there were a few people from Alabama. I actually spoke with one young man who's from Bessemer, but these people are a part of the National Immigration Youth Alliance as well as the Alabama Youth Collective Group, and they're all over across the state, and it was about 100 people, as you mentioned, so they're all coming together. It's a national effort, and it's a state effort to fight against this immigration law. Bob?
Okay, thanks a lot, Tametria. We'll continue to follow the story.